Hello, welcome back to my channel. Welcome if you have not been here before. First of all, I do want to apologize for the background noise if you hear any because there is landscaping going on outside. In today's video, we're talking about paper. A lot of different brands of paper that are really common and popular for drawing. And when I say drawing, I mean like colored pencil, graphite, charcoal, that sort of thing, a little bit of ink. I'm not going to talk about like the best papers for every medium, but I'm going to be talking about some of the strengths and weaknesses and what I like and don't like about a lot of these popular drawing paper brands. So if you're looking for what paper you want to try out or buy, I got you. And if you are a beginner artist that wants something more cost effective, I'm going to talk a little bit about that at the beginning too. So really, hopefully there's something in this video for everybody, and I hope that this is helpful for you guys. So let's go ahead and get started with the video before I keep rambling. I tend to do that in my intros. When I was a beginner artist and for the first couple of years I was practicing drawing and sketching, all I used was a spiral sketchbook, and they always come with a lot of pages, so like 100 pages, sometimes even more. This one comes with 60 pages, and you have plenty of room to practice. You don't have to worry as much about wasting paper, and you're not spending a ton of money on paper. So the two examples I have for you today are a Strathmore mixed media sketchbook and a Canson sketchbook. And this isn't going to be too brand specific because what matters most is the quality of the paper itself and the different textures and thickness and things like that. So we don't really have to worry too much about the brand. But this first one does happen to be Canson, and this is a little bit of a finer paper. It's going to be a bit thinner. Here's an example. Let me actually zoom in. Here's an example of a colored pencil sketch that I did a few years ago on this paper, and I also fine lined the outline here too. So this paper obviously is thick enough to be able to handle colored pencil layers and to be able to handle light inking or fine lining, and it actually did a pretty good job of that. But overall it's kind of a thinner quality paper and wouldn't be able to handle something like heavy inking or watercolor, for example. The second option is to get a mixed media sketchbook, and this paper is a bit thicker. So I have all this weird stuff going on the first page, as you can see, but I have this sketch that's just done on, in graphite, and then down here I used, I believe this is a charcoal pencil and a couple other types of pencils and even ink, and when you flip this over, it doesn't actually bleed through to the other side. Side note, you guys, I actually did Inktober last year using my Strathmore mixed media sketchbook. So I tore out the pages and I did Inktober, and it was totally fine and didn't bleed through or anything. So I really do recommend that sketchbook. Even if you want to do something like ink, it really does hold up really well. So if you're an artist that wants to experiment with different types of media and you aren't really sure if you're only going to be using pencils, maybe it would be good to invest in a mixed media sketch pad like this one. Now I'm going to get, I guess, a little bit more brand specific and talk about some of the popular papers that artists talk about and what I think of them, and show you guys some examples. I'm going to start with a very popular paper. So this is Arches hot pressed watercolor paper. Yes, it's technically a watercolor paper, but it also works great for colored pencil work and drawings and things like that. And this is 100% cotton, and it's a thicker paper, but it's a smoother surface. It's not a cold pressed watercolor paper, which would have more of a texture, and I wouldn't choose to use that for anything other than watercolor painting personally. My thoughts on this paper. So this paper is a bit expensive. It might be worth it if you like to use solvent a lot in your colored pencil work, because if you do use a lot of solvent, you need a paper that can really handle those layers and still give a nice, smooth result. So when I was originally filming this, I didn't show an example for the Arches hot pressed paper, so I thought I would just insert this little clip of a drawing I'm working on right now, and I'm doing like this very kind of intense background. So you can see there's a lot of colors in the background, and I used solvent and a lot of layers, and I'm also doing some intense detail work with the scales. So I just wanted to show you how many layers you can get with the Arches hot pressed paper, as well as how many details you can get and how smooth you can get everything to be. Now let's get to the less aesthetically pleasing part. I have these horrible cutouts of swatches that I do with pretty much all of my papers so that I can see how exactly different media looks on the paper. So as horrible as this looks, as terrible as I made this, because I didn't think I was going to show anybody else, but now I decided maybe it would be helpful to show other people, because I always wonder how exactly different mediums look on papers and what the texture that shows through looks like. So you can see how the graphite looks up here. This is charcoal, carbon pencil, and then it's polychromos and Prismacolor. It does have a bit of a texture. You can see the tooth of the paper. It's not ultra smooth, but it is fairly smooth. Okay, so that's the only watercolor paper I'm including in this video. So on to the next brand. This is the Legion Stonehenge Natural Colored Paper. I think I said that right. There are a few different types of Stonehenge papers I've heard, but I have the toned, and I got the off-white set because I thought this might be kind of cool to work with. So I haven't used this a ton. It's also 100% cotton, just like the Arches watercolor, but it's not a watercolor paper. Here are my swatches that I did for the Stonehenge paper. I swatched charcoal, graphite, carbon, even watercolor pencil, which didn't go so well, so I don't recommend this for watercolor, and polychromos, Prismacolors, and even the luminance pencils. I think that this is great with colored pencil. I have an example actually. It's getting closer to Halloween, so this is an appropriate example. This, of course, is a Frankenstein drawing I did in 2019. You can get a pretty smooth result, and you can get a good amount of layers down. So I do like this paper. I just wouldn't recommend it if you're going to be doing mixed media or anything like that. Alright, let's move on to the next one. This is the Strathmore mixed media paper, and this is hands down my most often used paper, no matter what I'm doing. If I'm doing colored pencil or graphite or charcoal or whatever, this is the paper I use the most often. Since it is a vellum surface, it has a little bit of a texture, and you can kind of see that in this example of Kylo Ren from Star Wars that I drew. You can kind of see how even in the background where I did solvent, it didn't turn out 100% smooth. And that's the one thing about this paper, is even though you can add a bunch of additional layers, you can't always get the most smooth result. But there is another type of paper I'm going to talk about where you can get a very smooth result. So if that's what you're looking for, then we will get there. And if you're wondering why this is my most often used paper, it is pretty much because it's mixed media. So if I change my mind or I want to add a different medium to the paper, I don't have to worry about it. I can kind of do whatever I want with this paper. So I kind of like how it's versatile and still a very thick paper that I can rely on. Okay, and now I'm going to move on to something a little bit different. This is the toned tan mixed media paper. I love how I say it's something different, but it's the same brand, mixed media, just a different tone. It's very thick. This is similar to the regular Strathmore mixed media paper, just that it's toned tan. There is one thing I want to talk about with this paper, is it has a little bit of an interesting surface. This swatch is actually for the sketch version, but it still has the same type of texture, so I'm going to show you guys. It's kind of like a hair-like texture. It looks kind of natural, kind of interesting. I think that this is best with colored pencils or like a black and white type thing, but I don't know if I'd recommend it just for plain graphite as much. I'm going to insert another little clip here just to kind of do this paper justice. I kind of want to show you guys how much you can make a colored pencil drawing pop if you use any type of toned paper. It doesn't have to be tan. And I kind of got inspired looking back on this drawing. I want to do some more drawings with my toned tan paper. I haven't used it in a while. But anyways, guys, I just wanted to show you really how much you can make your drawing pop by doing this, especially if your character or whatever you're drawing has a lot of white in it. Could definitely make that stand out. If you're getting tired of using only white paper and you want to get some different cool effects, I would recommend trying a toned paper no matter what brand it's from. I do like the mixed media option so that you can use any medium you'd like to, but either way, I think that trying out a toned tan or a toned gray or something might help to spice up your work. No surprise, the next paper is another Strathmore paper. This one is Strathmore Bristol Smooth Surface Paper. This was the option I was talking about for those of you who are interested in an ultra smooth surface. The surface is ultra smooth. The paper is pretty thick still, It does say on here for finished artwork, pen and ink. It doesn't mention any other media besides pen and ink. Again, I have my swatch sheet for you. You can see that it looks really, really good with graphite. With charcoal, it doesn't really stick very well, I have to say, so I wouldn't really recommend it with charcoal. With colored pencil, it looks really nice, it looks really smooth, but you can't do a ton of layers because it really just doesn't have enough tooth for that, but you can still use it for colored pencil. I think that the result is super smooth and pretty. Obviously it looks great with ink. Here's a drawing I used the Bristol smooth paper to do. I used marker and colored pencil for this, and I wanted a really smooth finish. I wouldn't recommend this as like an all-around paper to use all the time with different mediums. Again, as I said, kind of just works for graphite, pen, ink. You can use it for colored pencil, but not really, it's not really very good at withstanding a ton of layers. The next one looks identical, but it's not. It's slightly different. This is Strathmore Bristol Smooth, and this one is Bristol Vellum. So Vellum has a bit of a more rough, grainy texture to it. It's not actually that rough and grainy. It's kind of similar to the Strathmore mixed media paper, actually. With colored pencil, you can see there's a little bit of a texture there. With charcoal, there's kind of a bit of a texture. I'm not sure if I really like how charcoal goes down on this paper, but it is meant for things like charcoal, but it does give more of a grainy surface look. And with graphite, I think it looks pretty good. Again, this paper is kind of similar to the mixed media papers, so I pretty much mostly just used mixed media papers, so I have more versatile options because this one says for finished artwork, dry media. I don't really know how watercolor or anything else holds up on this paper because I haven't tried. Now obviously, if you're more interested in inking or fine lining your drawings, I would say the Bristol Smooth would be the way to go because you would get the pen caught up in all the grooves of the paper with the Bristol Vellum. But the Bristol Vellum might be better for holding more layers of things like colored pencil. And those are all the papers I'm talking about in today's video, although I do want to give a little bit of a bonus tip. Strathmore has a lot of different types of paper. They have one called drawing paper, they have one called colored pencil paper, things like that. I wouldn't say you need to buy a separate paper for colored pencil or a separate paper for just regular drawing. In fact, I don't really prefer to use the Strathmore drawing paper. I just prefer to use one of the Bristol papers or the mixed media paper. I'd like to know what kind of paper you guys like to use for your drawings, or if you prefer just to use a sketchbook for all your drawings. If you do use individual kind of pads of paper like this, I'm really curious what you like to use and why. Also, I know I have way too much paper, but at least I could do a pretty broad review for you guys. I do have to say, paper is pretty important to your drawings. If you're trying to find a new paper to use, I'd recommend watching a lot of different videos and doing a lot of research on it, just so you know exactly what the texture of the particular paper you're buying is like. I hope that this video was somewhat helpful to you despite all the unaesthetic swatches. I hope that those were at least somewhat helpful for you to see how everything looks on the different textures and surfaces. If you'd like me to go more in depth about a specific paper or talk about papers for other types of mediums, just let me know in the comment section. The sad part is this isn't even actually my entire paper collection. I have more paper than just this. But anyways, thanks again you guys so much for watching this video. Comment below, let me know if it was helpful for you or what you thought of any of these brands of paper if you've tried them out, and I will see you guys in the next video. Bye guys!